Hello everyone, it's Jackie Williams, and today I want to share with you a few tips about using your embossing folders. Now there's many techniques that you can do with your folders. We're not going to go into techniques in this video, but I'm just going to show you how to use your embossing folders in general. So the first thing I want to share is, generally speaking, the side of your folder that has the black Stampin' Up! Label is the side that will produce the embossed side rather than the debossed side, or what some people call the right side and the wrong side, although you can use either one. Sometimes it does matter if you're using a particular printed paper that you want face up. Sometimes it doesn't matter. For example, with this folder, it does matter. I would think you would want the detail of the shells facing up, whereas on the other side, the shells are actually recessed. With some folders, however, like this one, the painted textures, it doesn't matter. It looks pretty similar on either side. So you may wish to just do a little bit of experimenting so you know which side of your folder produces the embossed side. My second tip has to do with the sandwiches, as we call it, in putting your embossing folders through your machine. Now we have two types of folders. We have the standard embossing folder and a three-dimensional embossing folder. And hopefully you can see the 3D folders are much thicker, probably twice as thick as your standard folders. And if you have one of each, you can feel the difference in your hand. They're also clearly marked in the catalogs. So they do just have a slightly different sandwich when going through your die cutter. For the three-dimensional folders, you will want to use your standard white thick plate or platform. You will want your embossing folder with your paper inside, and then you will put that in your machine. Now I would like to, at this point out the seam of your folder always needs to go in first. And then for the 3D folders, you are going to use the embossing plate, which is the thick, opaque gray plate. It's also plate number 4. It does come with your machine if you buy a machine today. You can also buy them separately, and then you just run that through. Now, if you're using the standard embossing folders, you will want to use the thick white platform again. And this time, you will not use the gray embossing plate. You will use your cutting plates. And I do recommend that you have 2 plates set aside that are just for embossing, ideally, if you can, because then they remain flat and you get an even pressure all over your embossing folder for the best result. So I put 1 plate down. You're going to put your cardstock into your folder. Again, seam first, and then you will put a second cutting plate on top, because again, you never ever want to have anything running against your rollers other than your appropriate plates. And then that comes out so beautiful. My next tip for you is that you never want to go backwards or run your folder through back and forth in your machine. Like I mentioned before, you always want to put it in seam first. So if you run it through and then run it back through, then you're putting it in backwards, basically. And what's happened, or what can happen, because I've actually had this happen, is there will sometimes become like an air bubble in here, and it will put, for one, way too much pressure on your seam, and a worst case scenario, it could actually make your folder explode, sort of like, or like break in two. So I realized that the reason why people want to do that is because they want the impression to be even better. But the way to do that is to either tighten the sandwich by maybe putting another piece of cardstock or paper in the layers, or you can use a spritzer with a bit of water in it and just spritz your paper so it's a little bit wet. And what that does is it weakens the paper so that when it's being bent by the folder, it's just that much more pliable. and you should get a very good result. Now, my last tip for you are for those circumstances when you have perhaps a folder that is directional, like this evergreen folder where the trees are going a certain way. And you may find with what you want to achieve that rather than going seam first, you need to put your folder in so the seam is on the side. You do run the risk of the seam rubbing against the edges of the machine and wearing away. And I do have that just a little bit with this folder, as you can see. And so you know, if you've done that, do it enough times, your folder is going to split in two. So what I would recommend is when you put it in, there is just a little bit of wiggle room from side to side. So it's going to rub somewhere. So I would recommend that you ensure that it rubs on this end, the open end. So just push that all the way over to the side so that when it goes through, this seam side is not touching anything. That will just help preserve your folder to last that little bit longer. So there you go. I hope those tips were useful for you. And if you have any other tips to share or questions, please leave them in the comments below. Thanks for joining me. This is Jackie Williams. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.